係歡迎各位聽眾翻嚟聽呢個節目。咁電話裏邊有我哋嘅主持 Edmund 同埋另外一位Mike， 請講。
OK， 各位聽眾，今日咧好開心咧請到 Mike Howard 咧嚟同我哋做訪問，因為我係好關注響溫哥華東區有兩間好出名嘅大廈，出名唔係因為佢靚，出名係因為佢臭名遠播嘅。咁大家都知道啦，我曾經講過就係一間就叫 Balmoral Hotel， 另外一間係 Regent Hotel， 兩間咧都係響希士頓東街159號同160號嘅。好啦，咁我而家咧就會邀請Mike Howard 同我講一講我將問題問佢。咁我同佢傾完之後咧，翻轉頭咧我會做一少少翻譯，同埋會同大家佢講咗啲乜嘢。Mike, welcome to the studio, and I see that you are able to spend some time with us to discuss a few issues concerning City of Vancouver.
Yes, pleasure to be with you, Edmund.
Okay. Back in December 2020, that's exactly more than a year ago, you have asked the City of Vancouver one question. Actually, a lot of us would like to know that too. And you asked them, can they tell you how much the city had paid to buy the Balmoral and Regent Hotel from the Sohata family?
Correct.
The answer is no, right?
Yeah,
and then a year later, that is December 2021, that was about a month ago, you asked the same question. And you still have the same answer saying no. We still can't give you that. And okay, going back your record, that actually, because of this issue, I go back to a few of your articles, and I know that you have been following those two motels quite closely for the last few years. And I hate to say that, okay? Can you tell me, is there a special reason why you're doing it? Or can you give us some background information on the two hotels?
Yeah, sure, Edmund. You're right. Back in December 2020, the City of Vancouver announced that they had purchased the Balmoral and Regent hotels. A lot of your listeners may be familiar with these hotels. They're close to Main and Hastings, and they're right across the street from each other. And for years, they had been owned by one family, the Sohata family. And for years, the hotels have caused a lot of problems for the city. The tenants are living in terrible conditions, rodent infested, bugs, cockroaches. There's also been concerns about crime and violence there, so the police have responded to those hotels numerous times over the decades. Paramedics, firefighters, and the city has been arguing with the owners for decades as well to clean up the hotels because they were worried about the safety issue there. What finally happened in 2017 and 2018 is that the city closed both of the hotels because they were concerned about safety issues. And then there was talk from the city about expropriating both of the hotels. And then they got into a bit of a fight with the owners, and then eventually they worked out a deal. And part of that deal, as I understand, is that they were not allowed to release how much they paid for the hotels, which I thought was ridiculous because they had been a concern, as from the people I just mentioned, from the police and paramedics, firefighters, the city, the tenants themselves who had to live in those conditions. So I thought it was kind of ridiculous that they wouldn't release how much they paid for them when the BC government just last year had purchased several new properties along that East Hastings strip, and they announced how much they paid for the hotels. For example, the Patricia Hotel, which is further up the street near Dunleavy and Hastings, they paid $63 million for that. Further down the street, there's the hotel. It was a building that the Reliance Property Development Company owned, and they sold it to the province for $10 million. So the province has been okay with releasing how much they paid, but the city hasn't. And just to kind of finish off there, you mentioned what my interest was. Well, it's just as long as I've been reporting on this, and it dates back to my days when I was working at the Vancouver Sun all the way back in 2000 and 2001, these two hotels were listed as, in the top 10 worst hotels in the city. And so I've been constantly writing about these hotels because people's safety concerns, crime. It's affected a lot of things, and it's cost a lot of city money.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong. Okay,
Yeah.
actually, by the end of December, you actually received more than 1,000 pages of
Yeah.
conversation from them, and you couldn't find how much they have been paying for.
Yeah, no, I'll tell your listeners about that. So, as I mentioned,
I find it interesting.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. December 2020, as I mentioned, the city announced that they bought these two hotels. So when they announced that, I asked them, well, how much did you pay? And they said, no, we cannot tell you because of a privacy agreement as part of the deal. I said, well, that's ridiculous. So the next couple of days, I filed a Freedom of Information request with the city. And there was a couple of times over the last year where they sent some replies to me saying, we're working on this. We're going to get you some information. It's going to take a while. And then finally on the 23rd of December, they said, we're going to release the records to you. And so I thought, well, this is great. I'm going to find out a lot about this agreement, and I'm going to find out the price. But what they sent me was 1,086 pages, and I would say 95 to 99% of those pages are all blacked out or redacted. There is nothing on them. So it took a lawyer or two or three and other city staff people to obviously go through this 1,000 pages to black all those out. Somebody would have had to read 1,000 pages to black it all out and then to send it to me, and the answer was still not there. So I just thought it was a waste of time for me and a waste of time for the city, and I may appeal the decision with the privacy commissioner, but I just thought it was kind of ridiculous.
I think you should send that package over to the privacy commission and let them see what happened to what you have requested.
Yeah, I may do that. I have 30 days to appeal, so I'll have to make a decision pretty quickly to see whether I want to take that route.
Well,
excuse me, gentlemen. I think it's time for the break. Okay? After the break, we'll come back. 多謝各位停留喺收音機旁邊。咁而家我哋翻嚟另外一節嘅時事風雲。收音機旁邊裏邊咧有阿 Edmund 同阿 Mike 嘅。Please go ahead, gentlemen.
Thank you. Okay, Mike. Sorry for the disturbance. Let's get back to what we're talking about. Okay. I also, in your articles, I read somewhere that you actually have some kind of an amount related to the sale, but it's not, like I said, confirmed or official amount. And in fact, one of them is from a very liable source, being Globe and Mail, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. You're referring to the story that my colleagues, Mike Hager and Francis Beulah, both colleagues of mine, a few days after the announcement of the sale, the Globe cited a source saying that the city paid more than $7.5 million for the hotels, and I believe that. I have known Mike and Francis for years, and I totally trust what they found out. And then a couple of days later, another colleague of mine, Jen St. Dennis at the Tyee, wrote a story saying that her source told her that the total price was $11.5 million. And I've known Jen for several years, and she's an excellent reporter, and I trust what she wrote. This is not about whether I don't trust that information. It's just it's a principle thing for me. I
can
understand. I just want something on the record from the city that shows me the sales agreement, because I've written, as I mentioned, so many stories about these hotels and listened to city officials and politicians and police and firefighters and paramedics. I've listened to them all for decades complain about these hotels. So why can't you just tell me how much you pay for them, and then we can move on? I know that there's some projects, because I spoke to the CEO of BC Housing about the plans for both of those hotels, and I can talk about those if you like. But this is all about principle, right? The reporters I mentioned are excellent people, excellent reporters, and I don't doubt their information at all. It's just I wanted something on the record from the city about this.
I think their numbers are pretty close to what the Shahaka family's lawyer disclosed to the council, that they got private offers between 7 to 112 billion, right? So
yeah, and that was
what they were talking about.
Yeah, that was part of the public record, and I reported on that on the day that their lawyer showed up to council. But that was several years ago that they showed up to council and mentioned that. So that was part of the public record then, but that was from the Sahota lawyer, because at the time, City Council was debating whether it should try to expropriate the hotels, and that's where the owner's lawyer went to City Hall and said, wait a second, we've got a bunch of private people who are interested in buying these hotels, so just kind of back off, and we're gonna try to sell these on the private market. So those were the prices back then. So I don't doubt that it's within that ballpark, or what both Jan and Mike and Francis reported.
Into the ballpark, actually. Yeah. Okay, actually, and I'm surprised to learn that for the year 2021, the city has spent $1 million to maintain the hotel. I wonder what have they spent it on?
Okay, so what they've spent it on, that was another story that I wrote a little while ago. I was just curious, both of those hotels, between the two of them, there's about 300 rooms there. And I've had people in the downtown east side, some advocates, tell me that as many as 1,000 people were living in those hotels, even though there's 300 rooms. So there could be 2 or 3 people living in those rooms. I don't know. This is some of the information I got from the advocate. So that's quite a few people. So they've been sitting vacant since 2017 and 2018. So I was curious how much money they're spending on security and something they call fire watch to make sure nobody breaks in and burns it, or burns it to the ground, those kind of things. So yeah, since they purchased it, they have spent $1 million on security and fire watch and just protecting the integrity of the buildings for the last year. So the plans are, they were going to install some sprinkler systems and some other fire stuff in there, so the price is expected to drop considerably to look after those. But the plan is the Balmoral, which is on the north side of East Hastings, the plan there is to knock that down. And I know that the city is working with BC Housing, and they're working on a potential land assembly along that block. But that's going to take some negotiation. The plan would be to knock that down and then build something else there with housing and a health center. There's Peter Wall, from the Wall Center. He's pitched a proposal for a big center there, but he doesn't own any of the property. So Concord Pacific owns some of the property. There's some other private owners. So they would. That's what the CEO of BC Housing has told me, that the Balmoral will likely be knocked down. I don't know when. Across the street at the Regent, that will not be knocked down, because if you know the area, it is adjacent to the Sequel 138 apartments, and that is the most recent condo development built on that strip several years ago. So they're not going to knock down that building because it's right next to it. What they're going to do is they're going to renovate it, and they promise to have safe and secure, social housing, affordable housing for people. So there has been no public consultation. There hasn't been any talk at council, no reports to council on what comes next with those two buildings. But I wrote another story earlier back in the summer, Edmund, that looked at property ownership in the downtown east side, and that whole strip from Dunleavy to Abbott is changing dramatically. There's 58 West Hastings. There's a big development underway there across from Army and Navy. There's another one just down the street from Main and Hastings. There's a lot of development. So that strip is going to change a lot in terms of development in the next couple of years.
I see. But, okay. Reading other articles back in 2019, November, it was estimated at that time, okay, it may have gone up a lot more nowadays, to rebuild that region or bring down the Balmoral, the total cost is about $19 million.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yes, it is, and that's been a concern of some people in the city, including developers. Talking about the price that governments are spending on social housing to build new social housing. So that's an ongoing debate. There are some who say that they should be building more housing, social housing outside the downtown east side, where the land may be cheaper. I don't know of any cheap land in the Lower Mainland.
Where is the cheap land? Let me know.
Yeah. So anyway, that's an ongoing debate. But yeah, it's a lot of money. But then if you look at the other side of things, that the amount of money that is spent in the justice system, in health, with homelessness, trying to look after people on the street, responding to people who are living with mental health and addiction problems, that there's been many studies that say it's much cheaper to put people inside housing and get the treatment that they need inside housing. But the price of land in the city is what it is, so they have to do what they have to do. But there's going to be a lot of money spent to get that housing. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I remember back in December 4th, 2020, when Vancouver announced that it has bought those two hotels.
Yeah.
The mayor has promised that they're going to do something about those buildings within a year. And they were supposed to have a kind of a solid proposal in early part of 2021. But as of early part of 2022, have you seen anything like that at all?
No, and I hate to speak on their behalf, but I know that
I don't know. I read so many because of this. I have read a lot of articles. A lot of information comes to me, and all of them look so funny that promises and promises. And what we are talking about, accountability and transparency of government, I don't see it here. What happened?
Yeah, I like I said, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I know with the pandemic, it certainly changed, the order of business at City Hall. There was a lot to deal with. They've lost a lot of money in revenue, and priorities shifted, etc. And especially in the downtown east side during the pandemic, the focus was really on separating people in shelters, finding shelter for people. You may recall that, Oppenheimer Park, there was the huge tent city there. So there was a lot of issues around that. And the government, the BC government did move, in conjunction with the city and BC Housing, did move a lot of people out of that park and off the street into housing, in the Patricia Hotel being one. There's been a lot of concerns in Yaletown Granville Street, where they moved people into hotels there, and there's been a lot of complaints to council about street disorder in those neighborhoods. So the concerns remain about Vancouver, but homelessness has either remained the same or increased according to the city. The issues with people living with mental health and addiction or both, called dual diagnosis, that's only increased too. And as we know, more and more people are dying of drug overdoses. There's more people in the city, especially in downtown core, complaining about crime and broken windows and public nuisance, public use of drugs, etc. So we'll see if it's going to be an election issue in October 2022, but I'm not sure. It's a long one.
Okay, Doug, can I stop you for a minute? And it's time for the break.
Okay, you can go to your advertising.
Okay, let's go for the break.
Okay, Mike.